Good morning. How are you all? Good? I'm still on US time, and it feels like this would almost be more appropriate if we all had a glass of wine, but I think it's probably too early for that yet. Maybe at the end of the day. So I've actually been at Adobe for almost 12 years, and I was most recently before my current role, as Bengta noted, working on Adobe Primetime, but I actually started my career at Adobe working on Photoshop. And how many of you use Photoshop? Yeah? 25 years, can you believe it? And one of the things, it was really an honor, and one of the things I loved about working on the Photoshop team is that everyone really took it as an honor and a privilege to work on a product that impacted so many companies and so many students and so many careers, right? It's one of the things that we love about education, and one of the reasons why education is so important to Adobe. We've always felt that it's not only critical to our business, but it's really critical to our mission of enabling creativity and launching student careers, which we'll talk about a little bit more today. So a lot has happened in our society and certainly in education over the last 10 years. If you rewind back to 2005, Facebook was actually still only available to university students. I actually signed up for Facebook in 2004 using my undergrad alumni email because it was the only way I could get my younger cousins to communicate with me. Email quickly became like sending a letter or a carrier pigeon. I don't know if any of you feel that way with your younger relatives. YouTube actually had just come out of beta and had yet to be acquired by Google, and the iPhone didn't exist. It wasn't until 2007 that the iPhone came to market. But today, obviously 10 years later, our society, and certainly not just limited to education, but our society broadly, has really transformed the way that we communicate, the way that we collaborate. 3.4 billion people are now connected to the internet globally. Increasingly, more and more of those are through smartphones. And clearly, most of the world will be connected through phones versus laptops. Facebook now has 1.4 billion users, and 6 billion hours of video content is viewed on YouTube every month. Another stat that I think is pretty interesting, and we're all in the business of creativity and creating experiences and content. In 2007, when YouTube launched, per hour, there was about 6 hours of video uploaded every minute to YouTube. And today, that number is 400 hours a minute. So if you think about how many more people are able to create and to communicate across different types of media, across different channels, whether they are professional or whether they are students, whether they're design students, or whether they're econ majors or engineering majors who just value being able to communicate in a rich way. And that's really what we see being so unique and different and true about what we call Generation Z. There are certainly different names emerging for the post-millennials, is that they're digital natives, right? The students that are coming into schools today, and certainly that we need to start thinking about in terms of primary and university education in the near future, is they haven't known life without digital. They haven't known life without being connected. They are true content creators. One of the things that I love about watching my 5- and 7-year-old kids is that they are completely willing to try to create on any device with any different types of media. They expect to try and fail and to figure things out. right? So if you see how they interact with computers versus how people did even just 10 years ago, they're not daunted by learning. And even if they are kind of not trying to explicitly be creative. And one thing that we also see with this generation is that they are incredibly entrepreneurial, and much more entrepreneurial than in prior generations, which is fantastic to see. I think this partially has to do with the fact that the cost of being entrepreneurial is so low. There's Kickstarter. You have kids doing Kickstarter campaigns because they have an idea and they see an opportunity or a problem that they want to solve. So what does this mean for schools? What does this mean for institutions? You have students that are inherently digital. You have society that's changing in terms of how it's communicating and the complexity of how you have to communicate across all these different channels. It has a huge impact on schools, both as an institution and as an educator. So first, with competition. I know this is a little bit different in Europe, but in the United States, there is certainly a large consumerization of education on multiple different facets. First, we actually have an increasing amount of competition for education in the US, and you could certainly see this trend growing globally. You have online schools, you have private schools, you have public schools, and there's been a huge proliferation of just educational institutions, so much so that some experts think that up to 50% of universities in the United States could go bankrupt in the next 15 years. So there's huge competition for actually just attracting students and making sure your classes are full every year. And in the UK, I know that there's been a little bit of drop-off from the changes in tuition and tuition policy. But even if there isn't a huge amount of competition for just attracting students, there's a lot of competition for mind share, right? In today's world, there just is more noise. Making sure that you have the mind share of your students, not only when they're thinking about applying, but when they actually are at school, making sure that they're thinking about school as much as Facebook and Instagram and all of the things that they have on their mobile phone. Brand, we also see a trend of more and more CMOs being hired at the university level to make sure that the brand of the school is clearly communicated across different parts of the student experience. Again, from when the student is just evaluating and looking at the school and understanding what the school has to offer, all the way through when the student is actually enrolled, and then also as alumni, keeping alumni engaged and involved in the school after they graduate. And this is more and more complicated because just like for companies such as Adobe, schools have more and more channels to establish relationships with prospective, current, and former students. There's mobile, there's social, and we all are consumers. We expect to be able to communicate and have relationships not only with our commercial institutions, but also with our educational institutions through all of those channels. ROI, students increasingly are questioning the value of a college degree in particular as the costs increase. And so one of the things that really needs to be clear to students is what are the tangible skills that they are going to learn at university that clearly makes the case for pursuing that degree or those degrees. Funding is always an issue for everyone. I know it's an issue in the UK, it's always an issue in the US, and schools as institutions always need to look for ways to be more efficient in their processes. Of course, most of the mind share in schools does and should go to education and the content and how are we teaching and preparing the next generation to be successful. But of course, as every institution should, needs to look at the processes of the school itself and how they can be optimized. And then lastly, students. Again, one of the big trends that we're seeing is, of course, design students and art students and students that you would naturally associate with Creative Cloud and creative careers. They need to be trained on the latest and greatest. They need to be trained on the fundamentals of design, and there's more and more to learn there. But what we also see is a growing interest and impact of training the broader student body on digital communication and digital storytelling. Because one of the things that's true, and I can speak to this very personally, is even in corporate environments, being able to communicate with impact, being able to tell stories, being able to communicate visually, whether it's through video content or mobile content or just well thought through, designed print content, that matters more and more, right? And so we'll talk a little bit today about some work that we've done with various schools about expanding design thinking more broadly across the university with some really great success. And this is really reiterated in Tony Wagner's comment. He's an expert in residence at Harvard University's Innovation Lab. Prior to going to Harvard, he spent 12 years as a high school teacher. He's been a kindergarten through 8 principal, as well as a university professor. So he's really seen it all. And I love this quote: "The world is in a very different place. With the innovation-driven economy, knowledge is a given." You know, my kids like to say when we don't know the answer to something or we're out and about and we're just curious about something, we say, "Let's ask mommy's phone." I don't know if you all do the same thing. I like to not say Google because that's too much of a specific brand. We just say, "Let's ask mommy's phone." So you can ask your phone anything. Knowledge is at your fingertips. But what you can't get is the ability to teach students how to think, how to communicate, how to collaborate, how to initiate. And again, I don't know about all of you, but when we're hiring people at Adobe, that is exactly what we're looking for. We can teach them the content when they get there, but if they don't know how to communicate, they don't know how to collaborate, that is very hard to teach, and students generally tend to be less successful both getting the job as well as on the job without those skills. So let's look at what digital transformation really means, both for the student experience and then for the institution itself. So we think there are really 3 key areas of digital transformation across the student experience. The first is in the types of students you attract. And when students are thinking about what school to go to, what am I interested in, how do I get information about the school? And before, you know, they used to talk to friends or they would talk to an advisor. Students as consumers are increasingly looking for digital ways to get information about schools and understand whether it's right for them or what the school has to offer. And in fact, 72%, there was a Pew study in the US, and 72% of respondents said that they really wanted the primary way that they get information about schools to be mobile. It's pretty impressive statistic, right? 72% want to primarily rely on mobile as a way of getting information about schools. And of course, not everyone needs the same information. You have international students. There's one of the great things about education, I think, over the last 10 years is that there's more and more international focus and more diversity on campus. But not everyone needs the same information. An international student needs very different information than someone that lives 10 minutes down the road. And so how do you make sure that the right prospective students get the right information without overwhelming everybody? And we'll talk a little bit about how Adobe can help with that. Then, when students are actually on campus, how do you engage them through rich interactive experiences, again, regardless of the type of class that they're taking? And there are a couple things that we've done here over recent years that we think have been really impactful. First and foremost, just core design and arts curriculum. It's so important, and Creative Cloud has really evolved a lot over the past 4 years. We'll talk about that in a minute, and you'll see more today. It's not your traditional desktop tools anymore alone. There are mobile apps. There's new applications that are part of Creative Cloud, both for creating great mobile experiences, but also increasingly using mobile as a creative device for ideation, for capturing color, for a lot of parts of the creative process. So first, it's always the core, right? Adobe always wants to stick to our heritage. But as I said, the second part of this is really going beyond the core. And we've seen great partnership, actually, from design departments and design schools with some of the non-traditional areas, whether it's communications or economics or engineering, that we'll talk about later today, to really broaden the view of enabling all students to understand how to create visual communications in tools like Photoshop or Illustrator, et cetera. And then lastly, we've worked with a number of schools, including University of Texas and others, on using mobile as to create course apps. So mobile can be a great platform for creation, but it's obviously a great platform for consumption and information as well. And we see a lot of schools looking at how do they keep coursework fresher, how do they make sure that they can really understand what students are reading and actually learning and understanding by creating effectively interactive books on a tablet. And Adobe has a great platform that enables you to do that, that's tightly integrated with Creative Cloud. And then lastly, how do you empower students with skills that are in demand from employers? And how do you make sure that they graduate with really tangible evidence that they have those skills? And that's another thing that I think is very different about the world now than it was 10 years ago. I don't know about you, but when I graduated from college, I put together my first resume, and I went in for interviews, and I talked about what I learned. And I think those days are over. I think employers expect you always, again, regardless of the discipline that you're in, to show what you've learned in a very, very tangible way. And that changes a lot for students and something that we think schools can help them with. Now, looking at the institution itself, schools are organizations just like companies, and they have administration, they have services that they provide to students, whether it's financial aid or housing, and a lot of this requires processes. So we're kind of leaving the creative element of this and moving more into the business process. But it's a very real problem. We, at Adobe, we obviously have multiple solutions, not just Creative Cloud, but Marketing Cloud and Document Cloud. And Document Cloud in particular helps schools streamline processes, be more efficient, that we'll talk a little bit about in a couple slides. And then lastly, more and more schools have websites, and as you invest in these digital platforms, how do you know it's working, right? How are you able to get analytics and insight into understanding what people are engaging with and what people aren't engaging with? So I mentioned before, we not only have Creative Cloud, which is what I think most of you are most familiar with, but Adobe actually is broadly leading in how we help companies and educational institutions in digital transformation broadly. And a huge part of our heritage is in that creative element. We also have an offering called Document Cloud, which is really around digital transformation around business processes. So you can think about lots of things in schools that require forms that are typically paper-based. Imagine if all of that was digital, and right now, if you were at this event, you could get an email with something that you could go in and click on something, maybe fill in a couple fields on your mobile device, click a button that digitally signs it, and you're done with it. You don't have to deal with printers, you don't have to deal with scanners, you don't have to deal with wet signatures, and that's exactly what Document Cloud does. And we've shown great success for schools in helping them automate a lot of their processes. So for example, Georgia Tech adopted Document Cloud, and they went from needing about 2 months to onboard new teachers and staff to needing a few days to onboard teachers and staff. So obviously, most educators I know would rather spend more time on teaching and curriculum and less time on process. And that is basically what Document Cloud is all about. Marketing Cloud, which again I'm going to spend a couple minutes on because I assume this audience is a little less familiar with that. Marketing Cloud is all about understanding digital engagement and empowering whether it's schools or companies to have the best digital experiences for your students and your customers. So it's a broad suite of solutions that includes things like Adobe Experience Manager that enables you to create great websites, to Adobe Analytics that helps you understand what people are engaging with, whether it's on mobile or web, and then things like Target that help you optimize and actually personalize your web and mobile experiences for the right audience. So this means that if someone was coming to a website and they were an international student, right, you could tell where they were coming from, that you could actually show them different content than someone who was coming to the website from 10 miles away. So Marketing Cloud helps, again, large schools and companies create great experiences, but also make sure that the right experience and the right content is shown to the right people. And then, of course, Creative Cloud. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about Creative Cloud today and showing you what's new and different about Creative Cloud. Many of the world's leading brands use Creative Cloud. Some great recent examples that we have. Has everyone heard of Uber? Yeah, so Uber is using a lot of the very new capabilities of Creative Cloud globally. One of Uber's problems is that they have had so much global growth that keeping all of their design consistent across all of the cities that they're now in is a huge challenge. So they've really adopted some of the new web services within Creative Cloud, specifically Creative Sync that you hear about in a minute, to, at headquarters, create all of the common design elements that need to be used globally for campaigns, and they share those. So you can think of it as a global style guide, but that it's accessible from within your creative apps. So every single person on Uber's global design and marketing team have access to the same set of common assets, but it gives all of the local departments the flexibility and freedom to actually localize the content in a way that's appropriate for that geography. So it's that consistency plus flexibility that we're really hoping to accomplish with some of the new capabilities in Creative Cloud. And from an educational standpoint, I think one of the things that's really important to know is that more and more of these companies where, a lot of whom we hope where your students go work, right? They choose to be freelancers. These might be some of their clients. If they choose to actually go work for a brand, these could be their future employers. That we're seeing a lot of them adopt a lot of what we'll talk about today in terms of the new capabilities of Creative Cloud. And it's pretty amazing if you think about the adoption that we've been able to drive pretty quickly. At the end of 2012, there were 300,000 subscribers to Creative Cloud globally. And last quarter, we ended with 5.3 million subscribers to Creative Cloud. So it's been a phenomenal journey over just 3 short years, and we're excited to continue it. So I wanted to spend a couple minutes talking about a great relationship that we have with Clemson University in the United States, and how we're really excited to build relationships like this with schools across the globe. So I hope that we see relationships like this with many of you in Europe as well. So has anyone heard of Clemson University? If you follow American football, college football, I don't think you could not hear about them right now. So Clemson University, it's a private university in South Carolina. It's a nationally known and recognized university in the United States. Has about 20,000 undergrad students, so it's a pretty big school. And Clemson, they also have top 5. I think they might be, are they #1 right now? Someone was like, yeah. So they're ranked #1 in American football. I know it's not the right football, but American football, college football in the US right now. And they're very proud of their football team. They really have, as a school, taken a leadership position in digital literacy. They have made a really strong statement at senior levels of the school that one of the things that they want to ensure, and one of the things that they think is vital to their students' success, whether you're in design or whether you're in engineering, is being able to communicate digitally. So we've been working with Clemson for the last couple years as a partner on their digital transformation. And it's pretty amazing. They have done a number of things, and we're going to go to a video in a second, but they've done a number of things that are critical to this. They've incorporated creativity and the creation of mobile apps and other digital artifacts as part of the curriculum. Again, not just for design students, but for all students. So every student has to have an e-portfolio when they graduate. It's not optional. Everyone has an e-portfolio. And the benefit of that you'll also hear in the video is that it gives students this kind of concrete thing to talk to employers about. So instead of just showing up with a resume and talking about some things that you learned, Clemson students show up to interviews showing everything that they've done. And it's really having a big impact. So let's take a look at the video.
Clemson University is one of the nation's top public universities. What's unique about Clemson is our ability to incorporate emerging technologies within the education process.
Empowering all our students, all our faculty, and all our staff with Creative Cloud was such a momentous occasion.
This has had the most broad-based impact of anything I've done in 30 years in technology.
I think the main thing that I've learned at Clemson working with Adobe Creative Cloud is the true meaning of creativity. And I certainly never considered myself to be a creative. Having these tools really made a difference for me.
Clemson has this opportunity for students who can learn this software, foster it, be good at it by the time they get out to make them marketable for jobs.
Student organic farm that
I'm using Creative Cloud to teach what I'm doing. So in my creative inquiry, which was based in biofuels, we pretty much are taking videos of everything that we're doing and we're editing them down, making them really quick and really easy to see, and making it something that's really accessible for anyone to just look at and be interested in.
We take projects that students or undergraduate students are doing, and we highlight those each year in a magazine. In InDesign, we make all of our layouts there. We edit our photos in Photoshop. We arrange them in attractive magazine layouts.
Creativity is a skill, and anyone can be creative. It just takes practice.
Regardless of what the job is, the employer is looking for someone to come in and make that job something more than it was. Not just do a job, but transform the job and be creative in doing that.
Students today are capable of doing great things. We just need to enable them and inspire them to do it.
Great. So one of the things you might have noticed, a lot of that was shot in their library. And I don't know about you, but when I went to college, you weren't allowed to talk in the library. So one of the interesting things we've seen is, along with digital transformation on campus, we've actually seen a lot of physical transformation of library spaces. And in fact, we call it digital libraries. And Clemson actually moved all the books up to the second floor. And the first floor of the library is now an open media collaboration space, where they have access to all of the Creative Cloud tools for every student, and spaces that are really geared around group collaboration. And they've seen traffic, they've seen the students actually use the library much more than they did in the past. So here's a quick quote from Jim, who saw in the video, that just reiterates what they've seen. It's not just Clemson. We're working with schools, across the globe to enable not only making sure that the core design curriculum is fantastic, but expanding it across disciplines. And I'm going to go through this part quickly, because you will see a lot of Creative Cloud for Enterprise, as I mentioned. It is not just desktop apps. Of course, we continue to innovate there, but a range of mobile apps that enable you to be creative anywhere and enable a much broader range of people to be creative. Connected assets, things like libraries that enable you to collaborate with people in new ways, great education resources, and also publishing. So I'll spend a minute on Digital Publishing Suite. So this is a platform that we have that means that you can create mobile apps with no code. So it's really oriented around content-rich, deep content experience apps, where the focus is really around the design of the application rather than the coding of the application. And so it makes it much more approachable. And in fact, Clemson is actually requiring all students to create a mobile app using Digital Publishing Suite. It's that easy. You can go sign up for a trial on our website and actually create a mobile app probably in a few hours, I would imagine. So we see a lot of use for tablets in education and around digital publishing, whether it's view books in the admission process, marketing communications, alumni magazines, fan magazines, and of course, course apps. So lots of different uses in education that we are partnering with schools around. So lastly, I wanted to talk about our Education Exchange for a minute. So is anyone here familiar with Adobe Education Exchange? Great. So really all of you who are educators and involved in curriculum development in particular should absolutely go check out Adobe Education Exchange. It's a very rich community around curriculum and around professional development. So Adobe obviously helps build the community, but a lot of the content actually comes from the community. It's not just Adobe content that we're putting up on the web. So really encourage you to make use of this. There are 235, I think this stat actually has gone up. The last week I saw 250,000. So we have hundreds of thousands of members worldwide, 215 countries represented within the Adobe Education Exchange. And lastly, we continue at Adobe to look for ways and to partner with schools to look for ways to launch student careers. So this is an area that we would love to hear ideas and feedback on. It's something that we are incredibly passionate about. All of us at Adobe, the thing that we love hearing the most is when students come up to us and in that video talk about how they got a job because of what they learned through our tools, and obviously in everything that they're learning in school that helps them be successful. So we have a certified associate program. We've already awarded almost 500,000 certifications. We have a Design Achievement Award that we give out every year where there are global entries and prizes in different categories. And so 14,000 entries we had for the Design Achievement Awards this year. And we've helped create over 100 mentorships just in 2014. So we are really excited about education. We think that there's so much opportunity. There's more opportunity than ever in education to help students be successful, both in design and more broadly with digital communication. And as we really see Adobe's role as partnering with schools and educators like yourself to help transform the schools and education in new and exciting ways. So I hope to be able to speak with some of you throughout the day, and thank you very much for coming.